Quite a few pros have said they're unhappy with CS2 recently, and the community at large seem to be pretty anti-Valve at the moment. So I wanted to take a look at what the actual issues with CS2 are, and give a realistic, hopefully non-doomer-pilled look at the state of CS2 as a game, which has its issues, but I think is a little bit overly hated on in the circle jerk at the moment. And to start with, I want to talk about what nobody wants to talk about, and I know this is going to push people off, but new players seem to actually be enjoying the game. I know a lot of people from other games, even non-FPS games, that started CS2, and if you ask them about it, they would have no idea how much the community hates on CS2. In fact, I have asked them, and they were confused. And I actually talked to someone, I don't know if I believe this, but he said their entire Discord played 1.6, hated CSGO, and now came back and enjoys CS2. Which, honestly, again, I'm not sure I believe that, but whatever. Now, I'm not saying CS2 doesn't have a lot of issues. I want to go through what a lot of the issues are. There's a lot of validity to them, but in my eyes, as a content creator, what I want to see is CS thriving, and I feel like in order to do that, they need new players. And I think CSGO was losing to Valorant in that regard because Valorant was much easier to learn. And CS2, it's tough on weaker PCs, but new players are enjoying the game, and there seems to be, I guess, some quality of life improvements maybe that have gotten them into the game. And it's certainly very nice to watch as an esport. Now, looking at exactly what pros are saying, there's a laundry list of what pros are saying. I've actually written it down on a notepad. So mainly, the game is not optimized. Basically, everyone has said it. Dying behind walls happens on LAN 2 is what Twist said. CSGO had a more direct feeling, like it just felt better when you shot an opponent. And actually, Alexi B talked about this specifically.
I would recommend anyone who's watching this to download CSGO and just go shoot one bot at a server. It feels so crisp, like you're gonna cry after. Just how responsive the game was, because I really feel when you compare both, if you had thousands of hours in CSGO and you now have been playing CS2, you're gonna instantly feel the difference, and it's gonna make you a bit sad. So
now, funnily enough, right after Alexi B said that, the next day, the top post on Reddit, 10K upvotes, is this post, where he says he went in and tested this and actually tested the difference between shooting a bot in CS2 versus CSGO and the latency comparison, because there is notably a latency comparison, especially in Valve's patch notes, because obviously they do read the subreddit and they saw this. I heard mention that this was specifically a private server issue where you create your own server. This was much worse than it should be, but actually Valve added a new thing. I'm not sure what it's called exactly, that seemed to be at least partially meant to combat this specifically, to make this delay a little bit smaller. So it seems when there is good feedback that they agree with a problem and see it, they are ready and willing to fix it, although they are Valve. And I think a lot of the things that unfortunately we as a community want fixed are things that Valve thinks should stay. And I think that's probably where the biggest disconnect is, that Valve thinks certain things are part of the game that we think are like total bullshit. But in fact, it's funny, there's a clip of Rops from a while back saying, hey, anyone that says CSGO movement felt better than CS2 is lying. I think that's kind of hilarious. I'm not saying he's lying now, I just think it's kind of funny that the change in position there. But the biggest thing I really see are complaints about subtick and complaints about performance. And I think performance complaints are completely reasonable. I've seen people with pretty reasonably strong PCs. In fact, okay, my PC was having problems on Ancient, dipping, I mean, not to like 30 FPS, but dipping below 144, which was my monitor's refresh rate, even though I had a 2070 Super and 5800X, which isn't like a top-of-the-line PC, but it's still a good PC. I mean, I feel like I shouldn't have to worry that much about FPS, but I was having FPS problems because CS2 rather, doesn't feel optimized, and it feels like it's getting worse. One of the other big issues that I really heavily agree with is that it's ridiculous that there is a certain person, it's Pogu, or Pogu, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, that's fixing bugs that Valve just ignores. Like, Valve is legitimately just ignoring, apparently, these issues, and this guy is VAC banned. He got VAC banned for testing something in the beta or early CS2. Hasn't been unvac banned, but he fixed the boost bug that was in the game from day one. He found the problem with it. We just figured out the boost bug. It's ragdoll. So whenever you die standing still or standing on a ragdoll, your client collision will permanently be disabled for that player. There's a lot of problems with like people dying and certain things happening. He found another glitch where sometimes in water, especially it's noticeable on Anubis, you move around and it makes noise for some reason, even though it's supposed to be completely silent as of whenever they made that update. This happens when your ragdoll falls in water, meaning you die standing outside of the water, your ragdoll falls in the water, and they add these fancy splashing effects to make your ragdoll make sound, but then those stick with you into the following round. So it's kind of ridiculous that this guy's finding bugs and fixing them for free, and he's, first of all, still VAC banned, which is a complete joke, but also that Valve isn't doing this, and I noticed a bug recently that I'll bring up. So I posted this bug yesterday. Basically, it's possible to get visibility through any smoke in the entire game. If you just downscale, so I'm on a 4K monitor. On a 4K monitor, if I downscale to 720p, but it like stretches out so that things are kind of glitchy with pretty low settings, I can get visibility literally through any smoke in the entire game. Now, this visibility thing, I saw someone message me and they sent me proof that they emailed Valve about this about a year ago. It's kind of concerning that this has been in the game for a year, because if you actually look at this, like I can get full visibility through a jungle smoke here, which is insane. I mean, this is not even hard. And one thing you can add on top of them just not fixing bugs for long periods of time is that they ruined a lot of custom game modes with the update to CS2, or at least that's what people say, and they don't really seem to care, and nobody seems to know if they care. And then on top of that, in order to open the server browser, you minimize your game, which just seems like such a ridiculous thing to have in the game. Like going to deathmatch or any custom game mode is such a core aspect of Counter-Strike, but it's just sitting there. It feels like they don't care with these sorts of things. The only problem I have really about these complaints is that I feel like people are getting a little bit overboard with it. Okay, this guy this is how Valve works as an explanation for the state of CS2 just reminded me of the 50 Shades of Grey movie and the quote from the main male character, "This is just how I am," to explain his sadistic kink. So he's basically calling Valve abusive. Okay, my guy is calling Valve abusive, which I think is a little excessive. But again, there are many problems that need to be fixed that I just wish Valve was a little more clear on what they were working on. For example, this is an incredibly well-made video to show that when you move on stairs, currently it's fairly inconsistent in CS2. So when this is CSGO, sometimes, I don't know, just watching it, sometimes it can be hard to tell. He's going to line it up. So this is what it looks like going up and down stairs or a ramp in CSGO. And in CS2, let's see if he does. Yeah, he's going to line it up again. Same spot, similar area. You can see the crosshairs above the line when he's going down, below the line when he's going back up. That's pretty much unacceptable, and there's no valid reason for it, except for, obviously, that it looks cooler, and they've just decided to make the game that way. And I don't really get it. This one seems like a glitch, but part of the problem is we don't know what Valve is working on. Are they working to fix that? Well, there's another feature about the sway in CS. I've seen differing reports on this. This says in the beta, you had less sway in the beta than you do now, whereas another post I saw says there was more sway in the beta than there is now. But either way, there's a lot of sway where you can see the head doesn't look like it's completely consistent on the left. It looks kind of odd if it's staying in a straight line, which it probably isn't based on what we saw on those stairs. It looks really weird and hard to deal with. And that's why I think Maui Snake made the best point that
holding angles in CS2 is harder than CSGO. Watch. When the model swings out, it shows, it's like the angle of it is like, it's like the legs are catching up to the body in a way that is not how CSGO moved. So look at this. Look really closely. The chest is going first. The chest, what shows up on your screen first is like this. Is like this and then that. It's like they're all running like this. They're all kind of moving like this. They're all like that. But in CSGO, when people peeked you, it just was like that. When people peeked you, it was like this. In CS2, it's like that. You're sliding in.
Now, I want to discuss kind of like the thought process around some of this stuff, but there's a couple other bugs that I think are important to bring up that seem to be actually bugs that haven't been addressed. And again, we don't know if they're working on it or not. The jump bug, where randomly you seem to not jump max height, it's like you hit your head or something. This happens fairly often. Someone in the comments actually made a pretty good point. This could be true or not. I'm going to be real. I don't know. But he says it's subtick related. Happens when you get out of the sync with the server. Server lags behind. Erases all your movement. Calculates it. And I saw someone recently that showed that the longer the server is online, the more your jump height gets inconsistent. So here's a YouTube video. CS jump height from 0.k. Credit to him. Freshly loaded map. 100% consistency on 66 unit blocks. Then, after 60 minutes of the server being up, it's 50-50 if you can actually jump up that high. So it does seem to be, potentially, a lot of these issues that we're seeing could be because servers are online for long periods of time, and that might not be something that they seem to operate very well with in CS2. So this kind of leads to like this incredible feedback loop of people thinking the game is worse than it is. Like you have this guy. Here is a front page Reddit post, 2,500 upvotes. He's shooting the car. Now, here's the thing. In CSGO, the part of the head and the body in CSGO was not actually shootable. So initially, I thought that's what this was. Like sometimes the very back of the head, it's like it's not actually there. It's just it's not part of the hitbox. But he's actually shooting an unspammable part of the car because it's going straight through. Like it's going through a flat surface. It's going through so much of it instead of kind of going down. Like if you were aiming from above, it would probably go through there. This is actually just not a spammable surface. But initially, all of the comments were pretty much hating on CS2. You've got a few people that it seemed to become more popular later. You even zoomed in to show how you shot the car instead of the head and blamed the game for it. There is a little bit of pushback, and there seems to be this yo-yo effect where initially in CS2 we had a lot of hate for Valve. Then we had a massive swing to like loving Valve and praising them a ridiculous amount, which I think was a little ridiculous. And then you have, again, now the pushback towards being, hating on Valve. Now, the problem I have with the situation in the community is that there is very little reason, unfortunately, for Valve to actually communicate with us. Because if we look, they did an interview October 27th, 2023. They gave an interview. They said a few things in this interview. And look, some of the stuff they said was unfortunately a little bit out of touch. For example, one of the things that has always stuck with me about how little Valve actually plays the game is that when Ancient got released, and this is in CSGO, but this is a similar example, people were complaining about a water bug on Ancient where occasionally you would your footsteps would all start making sound, I think it was. Or actually, no, when you touched water, everyone throughout the map could hear it, even if you were holding shift. It was something like that. This bug had been in the game since Overpass was put in the map pool. Everyone had known about it, like 2014, 2015. People really started noticing it, maybe a year after Overpass got put into the map pool. Valve fixed this bug after someone told them, probably Pogu, but a similar person found that it was something to do with dead players and ragdolls and all that. They fixed it, and Valve put in their patch notes, fixed issue with Ancient bug. And I can't remember what else they said, but basically, the problem I had was like, okay, so Valve thought this was a new bug that only happened on Ancient, which means they hadn't been paying attention for the last 8 years. And part of that, I think, is on us as a community because we have these things that everyone knows, and you kind of take for granted that it's like, oh, everyone knows that. You don't even need to talk about it. I think it's necessary to continue talking about these bugs, even the ones that people know, because Valve isn't seeing everything. But that goes back to the idea that they're not telling us what they see and what they don't see. But when we do actually see that they communicate, this is an example of them communicating, one of the very few examples. Their feedback is unbelievably negative to the point where I don't see why Valve would communicate. And to me, it feels like the community, to some extent, does this to themselves, and we do it to ourselves because we complain so much about, we cherry pick small comments from Valve devs when they do communicate, or even the one guy that was like helping out and made kind of a suspect statement, but it was okay in context. That's been clipped out of context hundreds of times, thousands of times probably now. And there was positivity in this thread itself specifically, a reasonable amount, but the amount that Valve was taken out of context and absolutely shit on for this interview is unbelievable, to the point where I said it at the time, I'll say it now. Why would anyone at Valve want to communicate with the community when they just get destroyed for it? They don't get any positive feedback. They don't need to communicate with the community. Why would they communicate? And the CS community is one of the most anti-change communities out there, where even changes that are now received as very positive are looked at as like, wow, Valve is complete idiots when they initially make it. My point here being, Valve should communicate more, and it would make things a lot better. It would make it a lot more comfortable, but they're not incentivized to communicate more. I want to say you should be careful what you ask for when you ask for Valve to be more like Riot, because I see tweets on my timeline every day talking about how Riot is basically actively killing their game. They're adding agents that are overpowered. They're having too much stuff to be able to balance any of it. They are the exact opposite of Valve. And it feels great, like grass is always greener type of thing. It does feel great. However, that outlook has its own issues that cause problems that I think are bigger, longer term problems than Valve taking quite a while to fix issues. Now, personally, I don't think CS2 is nearly as bad as people make it out to be. There are some things that annoy me when I'm playing. Dying before someone's on my screen feels like it happens a lot, but I don't know, that might just be a peeker's advantage thing, especially in NA when I'm playing with 70 ping. Dying when I'm already around a corner does happen occasionally, but it doesn't seem nearly as bad as people make it out to be. And the game, to me, keep in mind, here's the thing. If you were playing hundreds, thousands of hours of CSGO right up until CSGO ended and then went into CS2, I can absolutely see how CS2 feels terrible. It feels very different, right? But I don't want to say like a full on break, but I wasn't playing very much CSGO from like 2022 until CS2 released. And I didn't really play much CS2 on release either. I've started playing quite a bit in the last couple of months, and CS2 to me feels just fine. In fact, there were so many bugs in CSGO, like one-way smokes and wall bangs and things that you knew for so long that they were broken, obviously, but you knew them for so long that you wouldn't even be able to point them out as like, oh yeah, that's a bug. It's just a feature in your mind, right? CSGO was not quite as good as people think it was, but CS2 to me feels fine now that I'm on a good PC. Now that I upgraded my computer, CS2 runs at like 200 plus FPS all the time. CS2 feels good. It's not perfect. There's still glitches that I run into, but there were glitches that I ran into in CSGO as well. I just didn't think this is Valve's fault. I just thought, well, that's just how the game is, right? And I suppose that is Valve's fault, but I wasn't looking to yell at Valve. And the other thing that I think is blown out of proportion quite a bit is the cheater problem. Look, there are definitely cheaters in CS2. There's often quite a few of them. However, I can tell you I've played well over 100 Premier games in the last month or two, and the rate of cheaters is very low. Even it gets higher as you get to like 23, 24, 25k elo, but around 21k elo, I think I started at like 15, so 15 to 21k elo. I've had maybe 10 cheaters in 100 plus games, and most of the time there's multiple in the games that have cheaters, which makes me think that it's most likely a trust factor thing, where if you have low trust factor, you're likely to get a lot of cheaters, and if you have high trust factor, you're likely to get very few cheaters. And that does seem to make sense, where you just stick them in trust factor hell, they don't even realize that there's a problem, and then you keep them out of your games that have good players, or like, normal players that are going to have less cheaters. Of course, you want to ban them, but if someone's suspicious, you put them in trust factor hell, whatever, right? That seems to make a lot of sense to me. And that would also explain why people that go and they play Face It for a year and then they play one game of Premier, well, your trust factor is probably not that high if you're playing in Face It. But just in general, if you're not playing Premier, you launch up a game, that's probably cheater behavior, right? So you're probably going to have low trust factor, and you're probably going to play with a bunch of cheaters, and it's just going to reinforce the narrative that there's a lot of cheaters. And I'm not saying there's no cheaters. Of course, there are plenty of cheaters, but it's not quite as bad, I think, as people make it out to be, especially outside of like the top ranks of like 24k plus elo in general. Now, looking at the player base, people will tell you CS2 is dying. I don't think that's generally true. I think CS is kind of old faithful, as in people have other games that they go and enjoy, and then they end up coming back to CS because it's at its core such a game that doesn't really change. You can come back after a bit of a break, and you have Deadlock that came out that people are really enjoying, that people are taking a look at. But I mean, you've got a slight decrease from August. If you look at this from last year, this is the same thing you saw last year, 2023, slight decrease from August. You look at 2022, you have a slight, much more slight decrease from August. Let's say 2020, you have, is this an increase from August maybe? A slight decrease from August. You have some variability just in player bases in general as time goes on. But all this to say, I think Valve has many problems, and there's definitely issues with CS2 that need to be fixed. And I think comparing CS2 launch to CSGO launch is unfair, because CSGO was, you know, a different project entirely. It didn't have like millions of players that they were looking to, like, you know, make happy. So I think the effort put in would necessarily likely be lower on the launch of CSGO, or like, you know, the expected effort. But the amount of hate Valve is getting is unreasonable, and I think it pushes people away, is my problem with it in general. In that you make the game, when people like, I'm going to bleep that. When people like, you know who I'm talking about, if you know who I'm talking about, if you know, you know, complain about the game constantly, I think they push players away that are on the edge of considering playing, because they make the game seem so much worse than it actually is. It's not a perfect game, but I think if you don't have CSGO as a comparison, it is still a very enjoyable game. And if I wasn't looking at the community constantly shitting on CS2, probably a lot of the things that I find annoying about CS2, I would find less annoying, because they wouldn't be in the front of my brain as soon as they happen to me, you know? So I hope Valve does put in the effort, and I hope they fix things, and their slow, measured approach is annoying in the moment, but I do have wavering confidence, I'll say, because some of these problems have been sticking around for a little too long, and the FPS issues seem to be getting worse over time, that they will hopefully continue to improve the game until it's in an even better state. But I think CS2 is not nearly as bad as people make it out to be.